Jesus offers truth. Jesus offers truth. If you think about the people who live in North Korea today, you could say they are living in a lie, don't they? They are surrounded by this whole system of lies, thinking that their leader is the greatest in the world, protecting them, even a godlike figure. They think that their country is the best place to be. Everyone else tries to invade and destroy them. Actually, they are living in misery. They're living in a web of lies and in deep poverty. And maybe you've seen those satellite images at night where that country is just in darkness, while everyone around them, you see the lights of the cities and towns. What if the person who lives in the web of lies is not just a North Korean citizen, but you this morning? Maybe not deliberate like them. Maybe they don't even realize it. Maybe you don't. But as we read these words from Jesus here in the Bible, we read that he says, basically, unless you believe in Jesus and follow him, you are living in a lie. See Jesus' own claim in verse 37 of John 18. He says, everyone on the side of truth listens to me. Implication, if you don't listen to Jesus, you are not on the side of truth, which is the side of the lie. And it's not just here. Jesus said it a bit earlier as well to the Jews around him in John 8. He said this, if you hold to my teaching, then you are really my disciples, my followers. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Again, implication, if you do not hold to the teaching of Jesus, you do not know the truth. You're actually a captive. Unless you believe in Jesus Christ this morning and follow him, you are living in a lie. And I don't want you to. That's the worst place you can be. As we look at North Korean citizens and we pity them, and you think, what a terrible life, what a terrible place to be. None of us needs to be there. And yet today, so many people around us believe there is not even such a thing as truth. Absolute truth. They're just personal truths, feelings, experiences. Life on that basis can never be consistent, can it? And we see the consequences in society around us. Things that were held to be complete nonsense, unintelligible a decade ago, 2 decades ago, are now considered normal and proclaimed by the media and okayed by the government. Many other people say, well, if there is truth, we find it in this world, in this creation. We think, we reason, we do science, and that's truth. They think it's the Christians who believe the fairy tales, with all that supernatural stuff about God and miracles and Jesus rising from the dead and so on. In our passage that we just read from the Bible, Jesus claims the complete opposite of both those views. He says, no, there is truth, and the truth is found in God. God alone, through Jesus. Here again, verse 37. He said, the reason I was born and came into this world is to testify to the truth. Everyone who is on the side of truth listens to me. So this morning, nothing could be more real, more true, more important for us all than to know and believe Jesus Christ and God. Without Jesus at the center of my life, without Jesus being there as the all-defining reality, I miss the most important thing to make sense of everything else. I miss the key to all of life, meaning that I'm basically living a lie. Jesus came, therefore, to tell us truth. He said, I came to testify to the truth because he wants us to be free. He wants us to live in the light, not in darkness. He wants us to be free and right with God. And do you see then why we are so keen to share this good news of Jesus? We want everyone to live in the truth, and all the hundreds, thousands around us who are as yet in darkness and living in this web of lies. How we long that they, maybe you this morning, that you will see the truth and be free and be saved and right with God. Because we all must ask ourselves that question this morning. What do I make of Jesus' claim? Do you believe Jesus' words? Do you believe his claim? Do you know the truth that sets you free? The truth that leads to life? Now, our reading from the Bible shows what happens when you do not do that. When you reject the truth. Whether it is outright denial, like the Jewish leaders, or maybe just not caring about truth at all, like Pilate, or maybe just being sort of swept up and going along with the flow, like the crowds around. All of those paths, what do they lead to? The death of Jesus Christ, the Son of God who came into the world. So on this Good Friday morning, as we remember the death of Jesus, we too are confronted with his claims. So that's the first thing we must see. We are confronted with Jesus' claims. Now, by the time we come to this part of John's account of the life of Jesus, he has been traveling around, teaching, doing miracles for a couple of years. The Bible testifies to that. Many sources outside the Bible, historical sources and books, witness to that fact that there was this man who lived 2,000 years ago, Jesus of Nazareth, and he drew great crowds around him, and he did miracles, and many followed him. And now Jesus stands before Pilate, the Roman governor. He is accused by the Jewish leaders who want him gone. They have presented Jesus to Pilate as some sort of politically dangerous figure, a king. And Pilate is clearly quite tired of it all. See in verse 33 of chapter 18. The emphasis is very clear. Are you the king of the Jews? He doesn't see before him a powerful, strong, charismatic guy who's clearly about to lead some revolt or rebellion. Now, what ridiculous, he thinks. Not ridicule at Jesus necessarily, but also at these Jewish leaders who think that this man is a king? Like, what a ridiculous claim. But then Jesus explains what kind of king he is. What kind of kingship he has. It is a very big claim. Read with me again in verse 36. Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then?" Pilate asked. Jesus answered, "You say that I'm a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into this world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." Now, picture the scene. You've got the Roman governor, like the prime minister of the day. Before him stands a prisoner, cast out, rejected by all those of his own people, all the leaders. They want him gone. What do you think? Jesus was searching for anything just to say, to do, to get out? No. He's calm and he's confident. And even though he stands there before the man of all power, seemingly, he says, "No, I am a king not even out of this world." He can call on legions of angels to save him. He has the power to just walk out then and there, and yet he doesn't. That's not the way of God. That's not the plan of the Father. Jesus is indeed a king. But he is far greater, far more important than any king, any leader in this world. He's not simply born like the heir in some royal family. He said, "I was born and I came into this world for this reason, to testify to the truth." Jesus came from heaven into this world. And that's why his kingdom is also not of this world alone. Powerful armies and big buildings and so on. No, it is a kingdom of heaven, a kingdom of God. See again in chapter 19 and verse 11. Jesus says to Pilate, "You would have no power over me if it were not given you from above, from heaven." Pilate may be the governor there. He may seem to be the guy in power. But actually Jesus has power. He is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. But you may wonder, what is Jesus' kingship about then? Why did he come from heaven? Well, clearly not to raise a powerful army or build big buildings or an empire here on earth. Of course, yes, his reign is visible here in the hearts of us who believe and follow him. One day he will return and then he will judge everyone. He is a strong and powerful king in that way. And yet, there, as he says to Pilate, it's different. The reason I was born and came into this world is to testify to the truth. Now, if you think, boys and girls, a king like Charles III here in the UK, he has got a ceremonial role now. It's different from kings in other countries or in previous centuries, where the king basically was the top boss. What he says was done. We're going to attack that other place. Okay, raise up the army. You need to follow the king. It doesn't really work that way in this country or in other Western countries. But good kings lead their people well, bring blessing, but bad leaders, for example, that one in North Korea, they bring misery, right? Well, here we see Jesus, the King of Kings who came into this world from heaven, and he is totally good, and he has all authority, all power. He has the authority of God, the creator of heaven and earth, your and my maker. Jesus has the right, therefore, to rule over every place and every person, including you and I. Jesus has the right to tell us what is right and good and true. Because he is God, and therefore he is the source of every reality, everything that is true and real. Think about it. Who else can decide or define what is really true and real? Not us. We are just small people in a huge world, in a huge universe. We can't try and define truth. We can't even grasp a little bit of how the earth works, let alone everything, and say, well, I create what is true and real. No, not us. We can't even look one day into the future. God is totally different. He's above all of that. He made everything, and he sees all of time, and he is truth, reality itself. And therefore, Jesus coming into this world, being a king, we must see that role as king as the role to reveal the truth. I came to testify to the truth, he says. The reason I was born and came into this world, God coming to earth, is to show us the truth, to show us reality. Yes, Jesus came to save. Yes, Jesus came to preach about the kingdom of God, as he says in other places. But he does all of that to show us the truth, and by revealing the truth about God, the truth about you and me, the truth about why this world is so broken, and what is the answer, and how can we be right with God. He says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. Jesus pities us. Like we might look at the persons in North Korea and just say, oh, I wish they would be free and they would have a better leader and they would see the truth. Jesus looks at us, caught in darkness, in lies, missing the greatest reality of God in our lives. And he says, I love you and I want that to be different. Come to me and find truth. Be free, be right with God. And the question is, what do you do with a big claim like that? How do you respond to that? And that's what we must secondly see. 3 ways to live the lie. 3 different ways, different groups of people in the story that live the lie. The first group shows they outrightly reject it. They just don't want anything to do with the truth. That's the Jewish religious leaders. See them as we trace the story for a moment. The Jewish high priest and the religious court, they had been trying to sentence Jesus already. They had been questioning him, trying to find some ground to put him to death, because dead he must. That's what they were sure of. Jesus had been so clear with them about their hypocrisy and that they just were after the praise of people and they were just after power for themselves. They claimed to live for God and actually it was just for themselves. And Jesus was a threat to them. And so they want him gone. And therefore these leaders take him to Pilate, the Roman governor of the time. Verse 28. They had to because they weren't allowed to kill Jesus themselves. And see then their hypocrisy in verse 28. They don't want to go into the palace of the Roman governor because they want to celebrate the religious feast. They think, my religiosity and purity in that way is important. And all the while their hearts are full of lies and murder. And then they dodge Pilate's question, what charge do you actually bring against this man? And they say, well, if he were not a criminal, we wouldn't have brought him to you. Verse 30. And Pilate then has that conversation with Jesus about his kingship that we briefly looked at a moment ago. Pilate concludes, no, Jesus isn't a danger. He is not going to lead some sort of rebellion. But to satisfy the Jews, he tries to then offer them someone to release for them at the festival. But the Jews choose the real criminal, the robber, the murderer, Barabbas. See verse 40. The Jewish leaders shouted back, no, not him, not Jesus. Give us Barabbas. And Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. And then Jesus in chapter 19 is mocked, tortured, and still the Jewish leaders don't give in. They don't pity Jesus, who is so unjustly treated. It's not fair what they do to Jesus, right? No. 19 verse 6, as soon as the chief priests and the officials saw him, they shout, crucify, crucify. Verse 12, from then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, if you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar. And verse 15, we have no king but Caesar. See then what happens when you reject the truth. See what happens when you reject the truth. When our plans take over, Jesus has to go. They rather claim Caesar as their only king than accept the truth and the Messiah. Why? Well, back in John chapter 3 we read this. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light. Those leaders prefer darkness, hypocrisy, injustice, because they hate the truth and they love darkness. Think of the North Korean party leader and all the high officials there. They are pretty happy to keep that lie going. Their life is good. And so they keep on stealing and murdering the people in their country. But when you reject God, when you reject Jesus, you must realize that you reject the truth. Faith in Jesus instead means living in light, living in the truth. See what it led to for those religious leaders to reject it. They were so blinded by their hatred, seeking their own status, honor, privilege. Now you say, of course, not everybody responds that way. Not everybody is clearly confronted with the claim of Jesus and then hates it and outrightly rejects it. Many other people respond differently. And we see that clear in Pilate's response. Many people today, maybe you, just respond with apathy and just, stick my head in the sand. I just don't care about it so much. Never mind, I'll live on my own life, thank you. So Pilate shows no interest in the truth. Secondly, Pilate just doesn't care. And we come now to that famous question that Pilate asks. Chapter 18 and verse 38. Jesus had just told him that he had come into the world to testify to the truth, and everyone who listens to the truth, really, who is of the truth, listens to him. How does Pilate respond? He is cynical and he sneers. What is truth? It's not an honest question. This is no invitation to Jesus to explain a bit more what he means by it all. Pilate isn't really seeking the truth and answers. I hope this morning you do that you really are seeking the truth. No, Pilate doesn't want it. He just doesn't care. The verse continues, with this he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, I find no basis for a charge against him. What a careless attitude to the truth. It is not without consequences. Don't be mistaken. We live in this kind of culture today. Relativism, pluralism, everybody's ideas are equally true, and you can't say, oh, my idea is true and yours is false. Oh, no, that's hatred. But it's got grave consequences. Things become arbitrary and nonsensical. Denying reality, for example, of our own human bodies, only leads to suffering, mentally, physically. In this case, Pilate just doesn't care. Even if Jesus has to suffer, he clearly says that Jesus is innocent, and what does he do in the next verse? He flogs Jesus with a whip. That alone in those days was so painful and so excruciating, his whole back torn open, that many prisoners died. They didn't even need to be taken to the cross anymore. Why would Pilate do that? Again, 19 verse 6, he again says, no, I don't find anything against him. 19 verse 12, a third time, no, I don't find anything against this man. He's innocent. And yet, Jesus is mocked by the soldiers. Pilate doesn't stop them. And after all the shouting and the political blackmail from those Jewish leaders, 19 verse 16, finally Pilate handed him over to be crucified. Pilate doesn't care about the truth, and the result is that Jesus is tortured to death. The greatest injustices happen when the truth of God is set aside. We see that throughout history. But it's not that different for us. When we care more about our own comfort or position or just the way I like to live my life, and we don't care so much about the truth or consequences for others, we too live a lie with great consequences. And that can only lead to injustice and hurt. Most of all, it leads to our eternal danger, personally. Now, you may be sitting here and you think, but it's different for me. I'm not Pilate, I'm not some governor, I'm not a Jewish leader, I'm just an ordinary guy, an ordinary woman. It's different for me, right? Well, there's another danger, another way to live the lie, and that is just to be carried along by it and not really stand up against it when you see it. And then we see that in the crowds. Remember, this is not just Jewish leaders and Pilate doing their thing here. Jerusalem was full of people. Many other people were involved in this greatest of injustices ever. Jesus being crucified. Not just the leaders in authority. Think of the soldiers who arrest him. Simply obeying orders. Think of the servants in the court of the chief priests and Pilate's palace. Think of the crowds who stand there outside the palace and shout along with their leaders, yeah, take him away, crucify him, we want Barabbas instead. They just follow along. Dear friends, we need to carefully think about our response to the truth, just as much as our leaders and the government and the dictators of this world. The impact our choices have may not be as great and far-reaching as their choices. Okay, it may not lead to someone's death directly, thankfully. But we must not underestimate what happens when we ignore the truth. You and I need to be careful not to get caught up in the web of lies and thereby reject or ignore the truth. Most of all, the truth about God, of course. We are called to think carefully, to pray, oh, God, ask me, give me discernment, help me to see what is real, what is true, what is in line with your will and your good ways. It requires most of all that we know the truth, Jesus, of course, but also that we are aware of the dangers in our society. Just think of all the fake news in recent years, especially online. Think of all the algorithms and the filter bubbles and AI with its hallucinations now. We get all this information and it's presented very confidently to us, and it can be completely false and completely wrong. Maybe we do well to just be offline a bit more. But also when we do go online and when we read stuff and watch stuff, be discerning. Is this in line with the truth of God and His Word? On a bigger scale, in society here, the rejection of God and truth has led to policies and even social acceptance of things that are just plain wrong. Think of how we treat the unborn or the elderly at the end of life. Those areas of life and policy are surrounded by a web of euphemisms and outright lies to hide what is really going on, even though real lives are at stake. And the truth exposes that. And so we are called to share and defend the truth and love those who are caught up in the lies. But as I said, the most important thing of all is to find the truth of Jesus Christ, and make sure that you personally are right with God, Almighty God. And so that's what we finally see. Finding the truth. Finding the truth in Jesus, the crucified King. Go back to verse 37 that we read a few times now. Chapter 18, verse 37. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." Now, why would that claim from a man who was killed that very day on a brutal cross, why would that be true? Why should you and I believe this? Let me show you two reasons. First of all, Jesus was completely in control throughout this entire time, even if it doesn't look like it. Jesus had predicted that one of his friends, Peter, would deny him. He had predicted that all his followers would run away. He had predicted that Judas, one of the 12, would betray him to the Jewish leaders and that they would bring him to Pilate. And it all happened exactly that way. Jesus had foretold several times that he would die, not the typical Jewish way by being stoned by the religious leaders, no, but that he would be handed over to the Gentiles and be flogged and mocked and killed on a cross. He had told it many times, and it exactly happened like that. See also verse 32. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. In all of this, Jesus was in full, total control. Even as Pilate thought he was. See it, 19 verse 10. Pilate says to Jesus, "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said, "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" 19 verse 11, Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given you from above. Therefore the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." Brothers and sisters, dear friends, this was all the unfolding of God's plan. And Jesus went that way, knowingly, through that terrible agony, because he wants to set us free and show us the truth and set us in the light. He wants to rescue us and have our eyes opened, lead us in the truth and the kingdom. Will you come? Will you come? But a second reason to believe Jesus' claim and to trust that he indeed gives us the truth. A second reason is that Jesus also predicted something else. With all that prediction of his death and the way he would die, he also said every time, "But on the third day I will rise from the dead." He would rise, and he did that too, with hundreds of eyewitnesses, and many millions of lives changed since. We will remember that especially this coming Sunday. Please join us again as we celebrate the resurrection. And Jesus Christ then, the King of truth, lives today. He lives in heaven. He is still truly human and truly God. And he proved thereby his authority to indeed define and reveal to us the truth of God. All of this betrayal of Jesus, all of the truth that we have considered, it was part of God's plan. Jesus was born and came into this world to testify to the truth. The truth about a holy creator God. The truth about ourselves. We are sinners in need of rescue. But also the truth about God's way to save us. And that way is Jesus Christ, a crucified King. 700 years earlier, it was already prophesied. And so it happened at the cross. He was pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity, the sin of us all. He was cut off from the land of the living, though he had done no violence, and no deceit was found in his mouth. There was no deceit in his mouth. All that Jesus said was 100% completely true. All the time. And they are reliable, his words. And then because of his death on the cross, he bore our sin, our lying, our being gullible, our ignoring the truth. All the neglect, all our wrong priorities, every sin, he bore it on the cross so that all who come to him will be forgiven and right with God and able to live in the light. Because Jesus, when he died, said, "It is finished." His death paid the full price for all your sins and mine. That all who belong to him can go free. All of grace, undeserved kindness from God. So in conclusion, the Christians in North Korea too trust this truth. They know it. They have found the truth about the situation in their country, but more importantly, the truth about their state before God. And even while their life is still very difficult, and they are hated and rejected and even killed, just like Jesus was, they rejoice because they know the truth. So much so that some of them, after having escaped from North Korea, go back into the land to tell others because they know, I want them to know the truth too. This is the best thing you can possibly know. This is the most important thing you can know this morning. The truth about God, about ourselves, and about forgiveness in Jesus Christ. It is the only way to life. Without him, we live the lie, no matter how comfortable it might be. Come to Jesus Christ today. I plead with you. Don't keep your eyes shut. Don't ignore it. Don't reject it. Believe Jesus and follow him, because he said, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Amen.